Well, hello, friends. I have one of my favorite people to interview because we've talked about so many things. I'm here with MD House today. We're going to be talking about a new genre for him. I will say I was super impressed with it, which I'll go more into that later. But first of all, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I semi retired about 4 years ago from a completely different career.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason was so that I could write good, clean fiction. And I thought it would be science fiction and fantasy because that's mainly what
Yeah.
I like to read. But then Barabbas hit me like a club over the head, and I had to write 3 books about Barabbas from the Bible. And then I had to write a spin-off called Sophia to that
Mm-hmm.
series. And then I had to write, which I just barely published, I had to write a little companion study guide for the first book of Barabbas, similar to what The
Oh,
Chosen
good.
does
Yes.
with their series. They do study guides. And I've done some science fiction. And I also now do, as you mentioned, fantasy, which is what I really wanted to do in the first place. And one of the things I really liked to read, or two of the things I really loved to read when I was young, were fantasy and World War II history books. And I know
Okay.
you like World War II history a
I
lot as
do.
well. And I was able to mash those together to a degree in this book called Crossroads of Awakening Memory. So I'm excited to see where this path takes me because it'll be a multi book series as well. And we're going to have a lot of fun with it. And the series is called End Times Convergence, and it means about what you think it does,
Converging. Something is going to be converging.
converging on the end times, right?
I love it. Oh, okay. So fun. Okay, so I will say I've read your biblical fiction, a little bit of your science fiction, and then this one. It reminds me so much of, at least the beginning. Sigmund Bauer did a series a long time ago.
Okay.
It was Thomas of Magnus series. Anyway, we read that series to our kids multiple times, and
Okay.
it's like medieval and it's hero. So the beginning definitely like immediately drew me in. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
loving this. And then all of a sudden you're talking about other goblins or trolls or whatever. There's something that you're like, okay, wait, this
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah.
just the normal medieval world. And then like magic starts happening, like he's pulling energy out of the air. So all of a sudden, and then like there's more going on here, and I know I'm barely cracking into this novel. I know like the convergence is not happening yet, but I know that's going to be happening. So
Yeah.
it's definitely, I was making dinner, trying to listen, and my people kept interrupting me. And I know I'm interested in something when I'm like, will you guys just leave me alone? I'll tell you when dinner's ready. And so
That's
that's
right.
a sign of a good book because it
Yeah.
was like, I kept thinking about, like, okay, I'm gonna turn it back on. And then my husband come and talk to me and I just stop the recording. Or I'm
Yeah.
listening to it
Yeah.
on a PDF. But anyway, so Mike, right away, I'm like, okay, I'm loving so many elements, but I know there's more to come. So, talk about in general, like the overview of the book and when
Mhm.
this convergence happens and all those things.
Yeah, well, it starts pretty small, as most books do, right?
Hmm.
Here's some 15, almost 16-year-old boy, and he lives in a sleepy backwater, peaceful place. He doesn't want to be a farmer, so he's going to join the council guard. They don't really do anything because it's a peaceful place, right? But they have this master at arms who's a war hero from the east, and he's really strict, and he doesn't like that. And there's some bullies among the other trainees and such. So he's going through that. But then they get inexplicably taken out and they have to intercept this raid, and that kind of
Hmm.
starts the journey for him, and it really explodes fast from there, and we end up with him joining this group of people that's trying to not prevent but defend against an intercontinental war on their planet. But pretty soon they're going to find out that this is not going to be a, a situation where you have two continents battling on one planet. It's going to be multiple planets. And that's where the awakening memory comes into play. And that's where I told you that we're mashing some World War II into this.
Yeah.
Earth will be one of the planets. And what's happening is the crossroads are awakening. And there are keys linked with books that can help you travel these portals. And they've been dormant for a long time. Once in a while, they'll spark and they sparked about 80 years ago during World War II and brought a German panzer unit over to this planet where we started. And they've been living on that planet for 80 years, kind of as hermits. But they're
Wow.
there and they have German Panzer IV tanks.
That's
That's
so
how we get
cool.
the World War II element.
I
And
love it.
yeah. And then you're gonna bring dragons in from a third planet that used to be on this first planet but are somehow extinct. So there's a lot there in terms and if you think about the Earth, our reality, there are things that we don't know about in the past
Mhm.
that as the end times continue to progress for us, we will find out about. More things are
Mhm.
being revealed every day. And we're going to remember some of these things and some of these old prophecies or old histories will come back to life. And that's really exciting for me. And that's part of why I wrote the book this way as well, is things are waking up, right? Because we're getting close to the end times. Everything's going to be converging, and the second coming of the Savior is nigh. And these multiple planets in this book are all subject to the same God. Multiple
Wow.
planets, human populated, right? And he's bringing them together, and they're all going to hit the end times together.
I love it. Okay, so there's so many things that are just exciting about this. First of all, the writing's great, but then you're throwing in it's almost like you put in like all the cool things. We have this medieval like sword fighting and battles. And it was funny during the battle scene. I'm
Mhm.
like, I could tell a guy wrote this because it was like this slash and this thing and that. And like, it was like
Yeah,
so like you would see like on 300 or something on a show. Like, anyway,
yeah,
then there you have like the World War II stuff and then dragons. And so I love that this is merging. So if you're like, well, I really like to read this type, well, yeah, that's in here. I like to read this. Yeah, that's in here too. But it's flowing
yeah,
in a way. And I love that you're doing the keys. And right away, this person that he helps, I don't give too much away, but this person near the front where he helps rescue, she's like, you need to
uh-huh,
save this. These are the keys to, was it
yep,
our worlds? I think it was worlds. It's like plural. And so he's
yeah,
trying to like figure out why is it plural, and he's able to rescue her with the use of magic, which is another
yep,
cool thing you're tying in. And so I think there's so many interesting elements that
hmm,
it's not boring at all. Like it's always like, okay, what's happening next and what's going to happen, which I'm like, super excited because I think like my people, my son
yeah,
that's 30, my son that's 35, my
yeah,
husband, they're all going to be all over this too. So
yeah.
um, but I'm interested, and I'm reading more speculative fiction. I went to Realm Makers a couple of
Okay.
years ago just with my son, just to
Hmm.
encourage him, and now I have one speculative fiction book, but I'm reading it more, and the
Yeah,
more I read it, the more I'm like, okay, this is really cool because you could do so many things different, and I love how you're like, let's
yeah,
just mash this all up, but it's also in a way that it makes sense to the story. It flows along
yeah.
well. It's super exciting, so
Well,
that's
here's
great.
another hook for you.
Okay.
That woman that you encounter in the beginning,
Mhm.
um, she goes by a name, and there is a hint in there early on that that might not be her real name. And
Mhm.
by the end, you're going to figure out that there's a whole lot more to her that's coming in the next book that you had no idea about. And
Okay.
so it does end on kind of a cliffhanger, but you'll like, I think, where it's going. And there are a couple of other interesting things there that at least interested me. And one was the fact that this main character, he discovers after his first battle, it kind of triggers something in him, and he discovers that he has access to magic that he didn't really know
Mhm.
he had, and he's somewhat of a prodigy. And then him and
Mm.
this lady, they find a girl who's also a prodigy, and so you get that the whole magic thing, but then
Mhm.
that magic gets to encounter technology, right?
Mm.
And there are lots of interesting books about magic versus technology, right? And that's fun to think about. Which would win? Because our technology really is, to a lot of people from the past, it would be just magic, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So magic versus technology is one of the other interesting things. And then the third one is that the main character visits Earth unexpectedly, as it turns out, and here he's encountering something he has no idea about, and he has to stay there for a little while. What would that be like? What if
Right.
you were transported against your will, not
Yeah.
intending, to another planet where they don't speak any language anywhere close to yours, and they have technology you don't understand, what would that be like, right? So that was
Mhm.
fun to think through, how that would work, and then to bring in some characters from Earth, and then start to mix the characters among the different places. So a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, and so okay, I'm just so curious, like, where did this idea even start? Because there's so many levels to it that did it start with the multiple planets thing? Did it start with just this character and then it just grew from there? So where did you even begin with this?
It really did start kind of small. It started actually quite a few years ago. I had thought of some ideas for this story, and never really got around to it because I was in my full time career and we had kids at
Mhm.
home, and I had lots of church responsibilities and lots of things going on. And I wrote some science fiction at the time, but didn't get a lot done. And then when I sat down to write this and just started to think it through further, it started to
Mhm.
expand.
Mhm.
And part of the benefit of having written all these other books is that my mind knew some of the places it needed to go with this, just
Mhm. Mhm.
because I've been writing. So now I'm up to 10 books, which amazes me. I don't even know how it has happened, because I'm still working part-time in my old career, right? So I still
Wow.
like my mornings. This morning was chock full of meetings with people from, India and Singapore and the United States, um, and then in the afternoons I can write.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, it started small, but then it just, even the planning expanded, and it has been a lot of fun. And I wanted to work in the World War II element.
Mhm. That's so good. Okay, so what I love, and I really think you talked about how did 10 books even happen? I get you because I'm like, wait, 90 something, but like
Yeah.
I don't even know. But I truly think, and I teach this when I go to writers' conferences, when your brain starts working on ideas and you work on it
Mhm.
daily, like not every
Yeah.
single day, but at least something, your brain will figure stuff out. You'll wake up
Yeah.
with an idea for this or idea for that. When I'm doing dishes, your brain will keep working if you wait and then try
For
to just get
sure.
it on a weekend or once a month, it doesn't work that well. And so you've been priming the pump and like you've been putting stuff out. You're working on these
Yeah.
different projects. And I also think this is very different than a lot of people. Crossing genres also gives us a lot of different creative ideas. And so you've
Oh,
written
sure.
like science fiction and then wrote biblical fiction with some speculative elements. We'll just throw that in there. Some type of, yeah, like, yeah, there's
Yeah.
spiritual, well, it's not spiritual would be considered speculative elements. And then now this is like a fantasy, but there's also this mashup. But I think the more you do that, your brain, it's like
Hmm.
it's like building a bigger muscle to work with, and there's more things to work with.
Yeah.
And so I think that's super fun.
Yeah. And if you enjoy doing it, it's also easier.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
ideas
Yeah.
tend to
And
come.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you talked about this being a series. Do you know
Hmm.
how many books it's going to be in the series? Do you have a plan for
I have
that?
no
Or
idea.
okay.
I have no idea. Remember Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series?
Mhm, mhm.
I
How many
loved
is
that
the
series, by the way. That one ended up being what, 14 books?
I have not. I have no idea.
14 books. And he died.
Yeah,
And Brandon Sanderson had to finish the last 3, and they're all
right.
long books. And I'm like, how in the world did you get to 14 books? I don't picture this going anywhere near that long, but I
Mhm,
would say at least 5
mhm.
in this one. So,
But I think also when you come up with a element that is unique,
mhm,
I haven't heard of any other books similar to this, maybe you know some, but it is unique. It gets easy. Now you're able to bounce
yeah,
through a lot of different worlds. It would get easy to write something completely creative,
yeah.
completely new, but also tie into this. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I had I had an editor at Book Life do a review, a professional review on this, and he or she, I don't know who it was, they likened this book to Aragon by
okay.
Christopher Paolini,
Yeah.
and I liked Aragon. That was a very creative book when it first came out.
Uh-huh.
It was a little different than the other things that were out there, I
Right, and
thought.
that it picked up a big following. We lived in Montana at the time, and he was from
Yeah.
Montana. I think he was a homeschooled kid from Montana. So,
And then
yeah,
he
I
wrote,
remember
what,
when
3 or 4, and then he, like, dropped off the planet for a little
I
while, and
don't
then
even
I think
know.
he just wrote another book recently. He
Okay.
just published a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, like and you know this too, the publishing world, the author world, like all of a sudden we just want to write books, and then there's all these other things you have to do to go with the books. It's like
Yeah.
editing and covers and marketing and
Oh, yeah.
interviews and all the things.
Oh,
So
yeah. And
people
I
like,
found
yeah, go
yeah, go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just say
Oh, I
people
found
say, "How many hours do you write a day?" And I'm like, "Are you talking about the writing work, the
the
work of a
actual
writer? Or are you
writing.
talking about actual writing?" Because those are two different things. Yeah.
That's they are two completely different things. Yeah. Yeah, so, one of the things I had to do is find a voice artist. So I don't have the audiobook for this yet, but it'll
Okay.
come out in September or October, and I found a guy from Ireland.
Oh.
And I had him give me some samples of different accents. He said, "Well, let me try
Mhm.
my Irish accent, my natural Irish accent, which isn't a hard brogue. It's a softer accent." And then he did English and he did American, and I actually really liked his just natural Irish accent. So we're going to do it in an
Oh,
Irish
wow.
accent. But he can do German as well.
I
So
was gonna say for the
in
World
the
War
book,
II.
you're going
Yeah.
to have to, yeah, you're going to have English being spoken with a German accent. He said he can do that too. I said, great. So we're going to do that. That'll be a lot of fun.
I am gonna
But what
listen
was
to
it?
that.
I was going to ask you, what's it like collaborating on a book? So you just finished one with your son.
Yes.
I've never even contemplated writing a book with somebody else, with a co-author. I don't know what that's
Right.
like.
I've done multiple books like that. Typically, it's when we have an interest that's the same. So I've done a World War II
Mhm.
books with my friend Mike Yorkie. His wife is Swiss, so we wrote about the Swiss OSS. I've done
Yeah.
mysteries and different things with my friends, my friend Kara Putman, and then I did some historical romance split time with my friend
Okay.
Oceana. She was a reader for me for many years, so it's like we
Okay.
have to like know or have similar tastes. But with my son, it was super fun because I came up with the original idea, and then we brainstormed a lot because we it's a kind of
Okay.
a different world. It's World War II,
Hmm.
steampunk. Um, it's based on true history, but it also has fantasy elements. So it's like another mishmash of all these things. So it's all that in one.
Yeah.
Um, and then once we got going, I would do a chapter, he would do a chapter, but as we got going, it got closer to deadline, he just kinda, like, ran ahead and, like, tied a whole bunch because I would write a chapter
Oh, wow.
here, and I would write a chapter here, like because
Yeah.
I was doing the real history parts to make sure, like, it was historically
Okay.
accurate, and so
Okay.
then, he would, like, tie all my pieces together of these historically accurate events, and then I went
Yeah.
through the final and did all the I add the 5 senses, and I add more of the emotion and kinda, like, layered
Okay.
upon it. But
Okay.
he lives like 10 minutes from me, so he's over at our house
Mhm.
many, many nights, and we stayed up late talking and plotting. And but I will
Yeah.
say, as a mom, it was super cool to when he'd come up with
Yeah.
like the perfect thing we needed. I'm like, oh, that's it. And so that is the
Yeah.
fun part of collaboration when you have two brains working on the same projects.
Yeah.
Although well, I mean, we have God's inspiration, which I think is like
Sure.
inspiration is breath of God. I really believe like all the
Mhm.
creative arts is God's breath in humans.
Mhm.
So let's talk about like the spiritual aspect of this because this leading up to
Yeah.
the end times. And
Yeah.
why is this interesting you and what message do you hope for the reader as they are reading these books, which they're going to be caught up in all the
Mm.
action and interesting things, but,
Yeah.
there's gonna be the spiritual aspect to it too.
Well, I agree with you. The Lord does inspire these stories. And he
Mhm.
himself, when he was here, he taught through stories. What
Yes.
is the most famous short story ever told?
The Prodigal Son?
Parable of the prodigal son. It is
Yeah.
the most famous, the most repeated, the
Mhm.
most widely published, the most languages. E- Almost everybody on the planet. Well, I shouldn't say that, but there are probably places that don't know it. But I mean, it's the most widely known short story in the world,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's a story that he used, and it has multiple layers. If you dig into it, there's multiple layers there.
Yes.
Lots of things to think about. It is a powerful story, and so he does use these stories, and he inspires people to create these stories, and that's part of why I do this. I want to reach more people with the inspiration I'm
Mhm.
receiving, and I
Mhm.
enjoy reading other people's work who I see have been inspired as well, because that helps me. And I went to a homeschoolers conference. I know you're big into
Yes.
homeschooling. I went to a homeschoolers conference, and those parents and even those kids, they are thirsty for good, clean
Mhm.
fiction.
They are.
They just crave it. And I had people walking up to my little table there where I'm selling my books and buying all of them
Yeah.
and saying, "I want all of these books for my kids." And so I had 9 at the time, and they just bought them all. I was like, "Okay, well, here you go." So it really is important. And I wanted to weave some more overt things into the story.
Mhm.
Now it doesn't hit you as hard in the first book. You won't see it as much, but when you get into the later books, you'll start to see that we really are talking about the prophetic end times
Mhm.
that Christianity has been teaching for centuries,
You're
right?
right.
For millennia.
Yeah.
We really are talking about that. What does that mean, and how do we prepare for it? That's really interesting. I'm not one of those people, by the way. I'm sure you've talked to people who will give you calculations
Oh, yeah.
on when Christ is returning.
Right.
And they'll go into the prophecies of Ezekiel and Daniel, and they'll add the days and the months and the years and whatever. And they'll say, okay, I had a guy at a conference a little while back. He said, he went through a long, drawn out calculation. I don't remember a word of it. It was interesting. And he said, July 3rd of this year was going to be the second coming. I was
Well,
like, great. I would love it if that were true. I'll
you
be
bet
there.
we're still here,
We're
and
still,
that did not
we're still,
happen.
we're still here wishing that it had come on July 3rd.
Right.
Um, but yeah, there's a lot. We don't have to speculate too much about the
Mhm.
when, but the
Mhm.
what is what we need to prepare for.
Yeah.
Both individually and as families and as communities, even nations. We need to be preparing as well as we can for that second coming, because it's coming. We're not going to be able
Right.
to avoid it. Just like death, we're not going to be able to avoid death, and we're not going to be able to avoid the judgment. It's
Yeah.
coming.
Yep. That's right. That's right, and you never know when it's gonna come. And we've had multiple friends that have lost 16-year-olds. 2 friends last year lost 16-year-olds.
Oh gosh.
We talk to my kids all the time, like, "We don't
Yeah.
know, we have to be prepared, our hearts have to be prepared," which is why there's a larger growth in, like, the homeschool market, and then they're trying to get really good
Yeah.
books in their kids because there's so much stuff out there that is not
Oh
good.
yeah.
We would do library runs, my kids would get books, and I'm like, "Ah, this well, first of all, this is a Christian publisher," so or sometimes you can't tell. So I would just do the open and read
Yeah.
test. I would just stand at the before we check these books out, and I would literally open the books and start reading. I'm like, "Nope.
You do
Open and
have to
read.
read. If
It's
you have to
nope."
read, you have to read in a few
Yeah.
random spots, right? Read
Yep.
a few pages, and yep, yep. You
And
have to do that.
pretty
Hmm.
easily, I could see that this is and I know
Yeah.
it's in the YA section, but this is nothing you need
Yeah.
to be reading. Sometimes I'm like, "I cannot believe this is in the YA section."
Yeah. Well, a good example
So
is George R. R. Martin. You've probably heard of George R. R. Martin, author of Game of Thrones. That
oh, yeah.
that wildly popular series.
Mm,
Many years ago, I thought, "Oh, this looks really interesting," right? And so I started reading book one. I couldn't get through book one because it was
right,
just
right.
such a filthy book. It really
Yeah.
was bad.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
he's made tons of money on it because I guess the HBO series is just as horrible.
Yeah, I
In
don't
fact, I
know.
had people tell me that they like the CFO of this company I still work for. He said he had watched some of those episodes and he was literally shocked. Like it was a visceral shock he felt at some of the things they were showing, and just the brutality and the
Mm,
sensuality that they showed. Just he was just shocked. He's like, "Wow, what did I just watch?" And it doesn't. I mean, it's interesting, but it doesn't benefit you,
no.
right? And hopefully, I've crafted a story that is as interesting as anything
Yeah,
George R. R. Martin wrote, but you don't have to wade through the sewer to get to it. Does that make
exactly.
sense?
Yes, and I every time someone's like, "Oh, you need to read
Mm.
this book," and it's a secular title, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"Okay, it doesn't look that bad, and there's not cursing or there's not explicit
Yeah.
scenes," but I just even if it's just a good book, like well written, I'll say well written
Mhm.
book, it just
Yeah.
it leaves you empty. Like there's nothing to take away from it. And they're like, "Didn't you love that book?" I'm like, "No, I didn't." And they're like, "Why?" I'm like, "Where's the hope? Where's the truth?" And they're like, "Oh," and then,
Yeah.
so I'm like, "If you
Yeah.
want something similar, here's an author in the Christian market that writes very similar." And I've read so many books. I could point people different directions because I think that is the point. That's why, I
Yeah.
mean, readers, avid readers of Christian fiction, there's people reading a book a day, a book every other
Oh,
day. I
sure.
mean, and
Oh,
they're
yeah.
just reading it, reading, reading it, but
Yeah.
it's also edifying them, and they're able to spend that time. I listen to multiple audiobooks a week.
Hmm.
Preparing for the interviews, but also on my own, just things I pick up, and I
Yeah.
always am uplifted. I'm excited. I love the stories, and so we do need to be feeding our soul with good things. And I think even books that aren't, they might not have a prayer in them. They might not have someone
Yeah.
getting on their knees. Just you could tell the worldview of the author by the stories. You could tell even the
Sure.
battle scenes. I mentioned all the action in the battle scenes, and there's like
Mhm.
there was blood spurting in different places, right? But it wasn't like it was literally I would have no problem with my 13-year-old son reading that because it
Right.
was
Right.
action. There was like someone got stabbed and then we're moving on. Like it's not
Yeah.
graphic and so too overdone and I can't get this
Right.
out of my mind now. It's just exciting and action.
Yeah.
Which I think is a big difference to a lot of stuff that's out there. So I'm so thankful for you, for other Christian writers who are reading stuff that I could definitely say to my husband, to my sons, whether my oldest
Yeah.
is 35, my youngest is 13, like read this, you're going to love it and know that they
Yeah.
will. It's going to give them everything that they
Yeah.
want to read and also give them hope and encouragement as they
Yeah.
continue on. So I
And
love it.
it's encouraging to see that many people out there creating good content now,
Hmm.
not just in books, but in film.
Yeah.
There's some more good content coming out. So just as has been prophesied, while the kingdom of Satan is growing stronger and
Hmm.
more aggressive, much
Hmm.
more aggressive to take away
Hmm.
truth and righteousness and freedom, it's becoming more aggressive. But on the other hand, the kingdom of God is also growing stronger and
Yeah.
becoming better able to defend itself and grow itself. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so good. Okay, I cannot wait for the audiobook for sure. I'm going to listen to the whole audiobook and then the next book to come. But where can readers go to find more information about you and then all
Yeah.
the books that you've written?
Well, to find more information, I have a website called
Okay.
mdhouselive.com. And so I'll post this interview, for instance, when it comes out. I'll post a link to that. I post links to other interviews, and then all the books are there. And then to find the books, you can find them lots of different places. In fact, I just checked on Barnes and Noble and Books a Million to see if Crossroads was there, and it is.
Oh, good.
So it's out there, not just Amazon. And I know there are people out there that, quite frankly, don't like to order from Amazon. So
Hmm.
like Amazon's too big and they're taking over everything. And during
Right.
COVID, they grew like by 4 times.
Wow.
It
Yeah.
was like the opposite of the Grinch's heart, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So
um,
they can order directly from you also through your, or through
not
the links to
yeah,
other
they can't
sites.
order directly through the website.
Okay,
If you
but they
if you
can
catch
get.
me at a show, I can sell you a book. But
Okay.
yeah,
All
I don't
right.
do
Well,
that yet. I've thought about that, but I haven't done that yet, like direct selling
it might be the next step. We
off
don't
my
know.
website. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I need to be able to hire armies of people like Brandon Sanderson does, right?
That's true. Well, basically pay my preteens in the house to do this, to package up
Yeah,
books
there you
for
go.
me.
I don't have any of those. It's
Oh
we have no
man,
more kids in the
cheap
house.
labor.
Now I have some grandkids that are growing up, and maybe they can
There
pick
you
up
go.
the slack for us. So
There you go. Well,
yeah,
thank you, Mike, for being
yeah. Thank
here.
you.
And I'm enjoying this. Again, the title is Crossroads of Awakening Memory.
Hmm.
Check it out, and you're
Yep.
going to want to look at all his books.
I'll show it to
And
you
oh, you
here.
got the cover. Yes.
There it is.
So good. Yeah, that looks
Yeah,
great.
the designer hit another home run on that one. And here's that
Yeah.
little. This is the little companion guide to that first Barabbas book.
Oh, good.
And I
Awesome.
just
That's
did
gonna.
this one on the cheap, right? This was a fairly simple one. I went to Bookbrush and did a cover and did the interior on Atticus
Very cool.
just so I could get it out there. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, we'll have all the links in the show notes too, but thank you so much.
All right, thank you.